The film begins with a terrifying school attack scenario with young toddlers yelling and bringing paramedics to the scene. Dr. Stern, a psychotherapist, is one of the volunteers who walks into the building and spots a teenage Wendy traumatic due to the event. Dr. Stern consoles the young child and guarantees everything will be fine. Then, the scenario is quickly accelerated by several years, where Wendy, a grown-up, awakens from slumber. It is disclosed that she has mental health issues. Coping with health problems and taking medication, Wendy and her spouse Lars share a home. And Carl, their son, in a compact home. Despite the fact that they are very close, for them, every day presents a struggle. Because of their restricted resources. Later, we learn that Wendy is employed by a restaurant. Along with a coworker called Elmar, she is typically a shy person by temperament and consistently seeks to avoid individuals. However, she chooses to question her irritable boss today regarding her advancement. Angela, unfortunately, the latter rejects it regretlessly, even though Wendy is her greatest employee. Not long after, when removing the garbage, Wendy encounters Merrick, a destitute person who requests the extra food from her. She complies. All of a sudden, he says yours is the case, and flees without providing her with any background. What an idiot. She is returning home as Wendy is deep in thought. Abruptly, she is startled in the back by Merrick. He exhorts her to forego her medicine, saying that they prevent her from being herself. As anticipated, Wendy believes he is insane. So as to demonstrate his superhuman abilities, Merrick leaps from the overpass and deliberately is struck by a car that was ineffective. Wendy has gone in complete shock at what she just witnessed, so she dials the cops right away. Following day, when she attends her counseling appointment, she learns that her new therapist, is Stern. Wendy talks about her interaction with Merrick, but attempts to dismiss it as a dream. But Dr. Stern develops a suspicion, increases the amount of her everyday medication she is taking. When Wendy gets home later, on the door, she discovers an eviction notice, increasing her anxiety even more. On the following night, she runs into Merrick outside the restaurant once more and is shocked. During this time, she had assumed it was all in her head. But confronting him in person, given what occurred the previous evening, she can't comprehend what she saw. Wendy attempts to find out why he's still living. Merrick, however, merely gives her a flyer. Prior to leaving the area resulting from the meeting, Wendy begins to experience stress. She then makes the decision to cease taking her medication. The next morning, she displays signs of retreat, finds it difficult to focus at work. She gets angrier and angrier, and easily irritated. On the return trip, in front of Wendy are a few catcallers, which makes her even more irate. She calls them nasty names, calling one of the guys out to swoop in for her. Wendy, however, grows angry by the second, and ultimately pins the guy to the ground. While the other thugs assault her amazingly, she launches them into the air. Many meters distant on the other side, Wendy doesn't appear to be affected and makes his way back home as if nothing occurred. It appears that she has reclaimed her skills, which the medication had subdued. Next, the picture switches to her colleague Elmar, dining with his folks for breakfast. They constantly urge him to enroll in college and pursue a legal profession. Though Elmar declines, it is made clear that he finds superhero books to be fascinating and lacks any living goals. One working day, a piece of shattered kitchenware is discovered by Angela and insults Wendy furiously. She even makes threats to deduct it from her salary. She couldn't control her rage. Wendy goes crazy and raises her superior's collar, yelling at her to be courteous. After receiving apologies, she discharges Angela, however, not before cautioning her to be cautious and be careful going forward. Elmar also sees all of this from a close perspective. However, as opposed to being surprised, he seems amazed. Uncertain of what is occurring to her health, Wendy pulls out the flyer Merrick gave her, walks toward the location. There, after some time, she finds herself in a deserted aquatic park. She at last reaches Merrick. He details how the fresh signs Wendy is going through are not any issues, but instead are the real her. They aren't the only ones, he also says. Furthermore, the administration has been writing prescriptions for drugs to those with authority to keep them in check. Even Dr. Stern is complicit in the plot. Discovering this, Wendy gets irate and determines to uncover the truth. She then moves to Dr. Stern's workplace and pierces in. As Wendy looks through her documents, she makes the startling finding by accident that Elmar, a coworker, is another of Dr. Sufferers of Stern. Worried about his welfare in Wendy's mind, to meet with him, she shocks Elmar entered his skylight by scaling it and begs him to cease the use of blue tablets that limit his abilities. She wishes him to be confident in his skills and turn into a genuine man. The next morning, Wendy's newly gained assurance enables her to challenge Angela and lastly get the job raise she has been longing for. Elmar then arrives and discloses that he has ceased getting the medicine. He also exhibits its new authority, the skill so as to produce energy. Then you choose to rejoice by going for a walk. Also in between, Wendy employs her skills to steal from an ATM. They ultimately eventually dance while having joy within a group. I saw Wendy find some men harassing other females and being hasty so that they can learn from it. She and Elmar together entice them to use the restroom and savagely strike them. After arriving at home, Wendy astounds her spouse Lars holding the cash they required to settle their debts. Meanwhile, it has come to light one of the guys, that who was assaulted inside the nightclub, has claimed the occurrence. A police officer. The authorities don't think that a female alone could have undertaken several men, and so they believe that he's insane. Suddenly, When Stern arrives at the platform and justifies they believe the lady to be truly extraordinary. Wendy visits the abandoned mine with Elmar one day. An aquatic amusement park where Merrick is encountered. The latter is initially cautious, but quickly becomes content when Elmar displays his abilities by turning on all of the theme complex. What comes next? Merrick refers to a building where they perform tests, and on similar individuals he clarifies. Seen from the outside, it appears to be a mental hospital, but internally it's a jail. Merrick discloses that also he spent a long time within this barren cage. Discovering this, Wendy develops a strategy to free the detainees inside the building. Elmar and her likewise persuade Merrick to accompany. Subsequently, upon arrival at the building, Wendy dons an alias and makes love to the sentry. She ultimately deceives him and fastens him. However, Elmar utilizes his abilities to cut a connection. The complete setup, turning off the cams when they approach the patient's tissues. They are seen a sentry by who are able to fire Merrick, though he is unchanged at all. Owing to his proximity, unbreakable skeleton the group outside while they are encircled by 12 guardians. However, Elmar instantly electrocutes them. Before scurrying off, Wendy feels ill by the aggression she just experienced. She is particularly apprehensive that the guardians possibly deceased, but Elmar appears unharmed. Instead, he brags his aptitudes and states his aspiration to be a savior. Merrick, though is incensed by Elmar's remarks, demonstrates that his careless attitudes are what caused people favor them. Being shut first of all up, he admits that he was once attempting to be a savior, which eventually brought about the fatal accidents of his spouse, both a daughter. Later, Wendy goes back home. Search for an inebriated Lars. Anticipating her, he is angry with her for skipping work, and right away thinks she has been having an affair with him. Wendy is perplexed, has no idea what to say. However, in the morning, in an attempt to save her marriage to her spouse, she confesses to lying to having a liaison with a job colleague, though she also what causes that she's stopped it now. Lars ultimately chooses to pardon her. However, their partnership is pressure. In the meantime, Elmar consults Dr. Stern and concedes that he has been having unusual dreams recently. He admits he had a fantasy of a destitute individual residing in a former water area in relation to Merrick swindling him. Then the film reductions in the water area in which Merrick's hiding place is discovered. A police officer and he is apprehended. Returning to Wendy's home, she has a party in the garden with numerous acquaintances and close pals. Irritated by recent occurrences, she just wishes to pause for a while. Her close members, however, circumstances suddenly change when Elmar Face arrives unannounced and tells Wendy if Merrick is being bullied. He attempts to persuade her to take off with him, begin a new existence, but she declines and strikes him. He left the home. Lars, meanwhile, becomes enraged. He observes Elmar departs and posits he is the person Wendy was dating someone else. Argues with her about it, resulting in a disagreement. Wendy, who can't keep going longer with her falsehoods, ultimately disclose she possesses, but Lars is not persuaded. He begins to think she is hallucinating. This infuriates Wendy so much. Lars is injured by her. The sofa table through, however, her firstborn focuses on them in utter astonishment. The extra visitors also observe this, and recognizing she has been revealed, Wendy hurried leaves the area. Contrasted with Elmar has been eaten. Due to his hunger for control and influence, he vents his irritation on his dad, electrocuting him, causing him to drop to the ground. Wendy, who just so happens to be close, notices the disturbance and runs to assist. However, when she arrives, the senior is not responding again. Elmar attempts to persuade Wendy to collaborate, but as anticipated, she declines. Unfortunately, the choice changes out to be an expensive like Elmar. Angry electric shocks along with her, causing her unconscious. When she regains her composure, Wendy discovers she is fastened to a cot in a building having Dr. Stern. The latter explains that Elmar's her is running away. However, his father is fortunately have been revived by the ambulance crew. Then Wendy attempts to get up from the table, with Dr. Stern says that it is her for herself. Safeguard rewind depicts an adolescent Wendy along with her mom in the administrative building. She had been having trouble connecting alongside her friends, and consequently the teacher confiscated she played a CD. No, all at once Wendy moves up a fury-filled rage and raises the desk with her own hands. She then begins its filled of push toward the teacher, murdering him violently. Wallop which into your computer lesson. Presently, Dr. Stern comforts Wendy that she isn't an eccentric but only requires extra caution. Wendy is now authorized toward the same psychiatric that she had earlier breached. Dr. Stern next sees Lars and demands he will transport Wendy's kid in her study with Carl. She wishes to be certain. The young kid does not suffer from any unique abilities. As the days go by, Wendy is pressured to administer medicine while within the building. She encounters there's Merrick, but it's obvious that he acknowledged one day his destiny. Elmar stops by. Wendy explains they are her intended to be in concert, added commitments, releasing her from the building. Wendy, however, disregards all of his assertions. Instead of bringing the soldiers angry for assistance upon the treachery, Elmar declares which he will pursue her household and take them out one by one. The following picture we learn more the fact that Carl has been directed using blue tablets by Dr. Stern. Then suddenly the energy is separated from their home. Then Elmar gets there. Back in the building, a similar electricity outage is present, which permits the prisoners to escape. Wendy, however, after leaving, she is questioned Dr. Stern, a few soldiers, as well. Things seem gloomy for our main character, but unexpectedly Merrick appears at the incident, saving Wendy. He valiantly battles the guardians and calms them individually. Unfortunately, in the course several shots are fired at him. Merrick is as taking medicine, his abilities are tamed, and so on. Dies gently, eager to observe the relatives of his. Some time afterward, Wendy returns home, where she locates due to her family's kept captive by the insane Elmar. She attempts striking him, but absent her abilities it doesn't mean much. Use only that Lars throws a plastic glove for her to enable her may harm Elmar without acquiring electrocuted. Strategy succeeds, and in the same manner drugs Wendy is taking also diminishes. She recovers her use of abilities with all her might. She then strikes through Amar in the wall through the poof. I refer to the pool where he was electrocutes his own death. Following the experience, Wendy sobbed. Loves her household, recognizing the time to get her to go and safeguard the governments. Them she pledges to stay in contact and leaves with a sincere farewell. As she departs, Wendy senses an unexpected sense of direction, resolve, and to knock down the dishonest. The method it can find her long after observing Wendy as a watchdog, using her abilities to pursue justice and safeguard who are incapable. They defend themselves. She observes carefully, monitoring her relatives in the distant, always creating ensure their safety. Both auditory and Wendy's goal is hardly finished. She is tracking the ones down who had run away the building, looking for ways to justice for them and make sure nothing else must be suffering, as she did after titles moment from the film. Then makes known that Carl has received DNA from his mother, as he argues self-defense against his bullies by having them float